Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmitz_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmitz.
Welcome into Wednesday, Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbal is in, and I'm gone for like 2 days. You break the mic again. God love you. And what is this? Is this your defiance? Is this your protest to the Von Miller news? You shave your stash? You're like, ugh. I wish I was filming right now because Elijah he's going Griswold here. It's the scene from Christmas Vacation where Griswold's on the ladder and he's putting the lights up on the side of the gutter and he's putting the arm under and then over and then under and then over the ladder. And that's what Elijah's trying to do right now with his microphone. He's trying to screw it in. He's working. Yes, he's moving it with that right thumb. And I think maybe he has it secure. Yes, he does. He has it secure. We're back, baby. Little high wire act there. Good to see you, man. You broke out the old Bic, the Mach 3. You're cleanly shaven.
I am, yeah. So
did you lose a bet, or did someone just call the cops on you?
Well, no. I had the mustache rocking for the fantasy football draft on Sunday night. And I asserted my dominance over them.
Gardner?
I did not, thankfully. I don't want him on my team. I don't trust that offense. But everyone walked in, and they saw the mustache, and they're like, wow, this dude's just got a kick-ass mustache. Like, I stand no chance against him this year. It was the intimidation factor.
Okay, you went with the intimidation card.
Yeah, and as soon as the draft was over, I guess I had no need for it anymore.
No, you planned it out well. You let it go chia pet, and then it's time to move on from it. So we are loaded up. We will talk with Nebraska expert. We're talking 4 decades. Mike Babcock from Hail Varsity with us in about 15 minutes. A little golf as Mike Schuhart from Wilderness Ridge. Shuey will join us. There is no truth to the rumor that Shuey sent a decapitated putter to the commissioner or the Big Ten office in Rosemont, Illinois, trying to further this vote that we're all waiting on. Brad Edwards, insider with ESPN College Football with us, and we'll dive into some NFL as well. Numbers to get in, 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. You've probably seen on social media the reports, the comments earlier from University Systems President Ted Carter. And that is, listen, the competition committee is putting things, and I'm paraphrasing, he's putting things together, that competition task force, plans in place to pass along to the presidents and chancellors so they can vote. And that vote could happen very soon. Teddy Greenstein from the Chicago Tribune. I always like when Northwestern comes to town. It's usually an overtime game, a thrilling finish. And Teddy's in the press box to say hi to. Our old friend Mike Riley worked with and knows Teddy really well from the Tribune days. So long and short of this is Teddy is saying maybe Saturday, maybe Sunday, maybe Monday for a vote. So what are we voting on? The important question asked by Brandon Vogel of Hail Varsity, who will be with us tomorrow. Well, you're voting on return to play, and you're voting on a date. You need a yes from the stuffed suits in the ivory towers, excluding Teddy Carter and Ronnie Green, of course, and those at Ohio State and those at Iowa. They are off the persona non grata list, clearly, because they want to play football. They've always wanted to play football. It's the other 11 that need to turn into a 9-5 vote to get back and say, yes, this is our date. This is when we can play. Are you going to get agreement on when that day is? And the answer is probably not. So you need a 60% per the bylaws. What can you get here by this weekend? Can you get rapid testing materials by the end of the month to every college campus? Can you get EKG machines to every college campus, or at least somewhere you can do those tests if myocarditis is still, which it is, a topic of concern? Those are all things that need to happen. Hopefully that's why the Big Ten's been so silent, except for a statement they released in response to, state lawmakers and political leaders as they came together. And we're talking from all sorts of Rust Belt states and upper Midwest states, from Iowa to Pennsylvania to Wisconsin to Illinois to Minnesota. On the Republican side of the aisle, they all put a letter out to the Big Ten. I'll read what the Big Ten said and responded with. Of course, you had 28 in Nebraska's unicameral bipartisan put their words on paper and send a letter also to the Big Ten asking for reconsideration on the August 11th decision to suspend. So there is more mounting political pressure, this time at the state level. The president's already done his thing on Twitter the last couple of weeks. Where does this go? What push do you get? Is this Reggie Bush helping out Matt Leinart across the goal line in South Bend back in 2005 to get a date circled and movement forward? This is a concern. You've got Penn State right now suspending athletic activity. You've had 48 student athletes test positive for COVID. Iowa just returned to practice today. Is Michigan State practicing? I don't know. Is Northwestern practicing? I don't know who's practicing. I don't know who's taking advantage of the 12 hours. I don't know the schedule. I know Nebraska's a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. They've been practicing. There's been no news of athletic teams or players contracting COVID. Not that there hasn't been contractions, but there's not been there's no information out that says, okay, Nebraska has had COVID cases spike up and the positivity rate's gone up because they've been away from football. We don't have that. Well, see, look, we know what's going on, and you've got Greek members being put on double secret probation by the day. I get that because there's footage on social media of non-social distancing and non-masking. But what you're going to have a hard time with, Elijah, is you've got your folks that have got their poop in a group, and they're practicing, and their kids are staying away from dicey areas where COVID may be wandering. And that could be anywhere, but we're talking off the court, off the field. That situation, are you going to a house party? Are you pulling a Rutgers? It seems like Nebraska's been very, very disciplined. It seems like Ohio State has been disciplined. Well, the minute you're not nose to the grindstone and working towards kickoff, I mean, some programs and some guys are going to go be college kids. And that's an issue because there's a higher likelihood if you're not practicing or working towards something, then you're going to kind of fall back into off-season mode or spring camp mode. You know, what's your discipline level like? And right now, getting popped with 48 Penn State students, and they did not specify what sport. But Penn State's pausing right now. Iowa's off of a pause. Nebraska seems all right. Ohio State seems good. But where is the rest of the league at? Who's practicing? The question that needs answered is who is ready to go October 10th. And when this vote hopefully happens this weekend, what president and chancellor and athletic director is going to come forward and say, yeah, you know, we're really kind of hoping on this Thanksgiving thing. That's where we need to settle because our guys and our team can't and won't be ready by October 10th. That's what I fear. And I fear this because you've got, again, Penn State's not being specific. It's not James Franklin's kids per se that have 48 positive tests of COVID. It could be soccer. It could be field hockey, whatever else is in fall. I don't know. Really, it's kind of football to me. But that's an issue. And you don't have a level playing field for an October 10th start right now. Just because in some programs, Coach Barnett told us this last week, it's a quarter system. Some guys, if it's just 12 hours a week, you're doing practice. Maybe some teams aren't even practicing. Is what we know. Michigan's been practicing. We know Michigan's ready to go. We know Ohio State's ready to go. We know Nebraska's ready to go. But some programs aren't going to say, you know what, we're going to be ready to rock by October 10th. I think that could be a real issue. And quite honestly, if you can't play this fall, I want football. Some is better than none. I have doubled down on that. But it's just going to be a hollow season. We're going to get it. Great. We'll be able to enjoy it, hopefully, Thanksgiving. Or maybe they do this stupid January thing, which is just idiotic. But if you can't go October 10th, I don't know that I'd go at all. And that sounds pretty harsh. But if I'm Ohio State, what team am I going to be able to field, pun intended, in January? Or even, am I going to be able to do enough Thanksgiving to college football playoff selection time, December 20th, to convince the committee, hey, we're a 6-0 Ohio State team that is ready to roll. We're a loaded football team. We want Clemson. We want Bama. Give us Notre Dame. Because that's where I'm at. If you're going to do this here, allow Ohio State a chance to compete, and to do that, they've got to start October 10th, maybe at the latest, and you shave a game off the schedule, October 17th. I still hope that is in discussion when they talk about things this weekend. But based on what's happened at Penn State, based on what's going on with COVID tests and some teams having to hit pause because of discipline, and we don't know if kids got this because the chancellors and presidents have kept classes open, where somebody's come to a classroom and has had COVID, that almighty tuition check and that almighty dorm check for room and board. There's a hell of a lot more students than student athletes on campus. That's going to pay the bills, and those have been kept open. So I don't know what we're going to see or hear this weekend, other than, for the first time, I have had the utmost optimism for October 10th. I don't know, based on the recency of this Penn State thing and the fact that other schools may not be ready to go by October 10th, I think that's going to slam the brakes on the teams that have done their job and stayed disciplined. I've used that term a lot, but they've stayed away from getting in contact with somebody who could infect them. And push comes to shove, you're going to have more teams that aren't going to be ready to go. And I think that's going to be heard this weekend. Hope I'm wrong.
It sounds backwards, but I think the fastest way to stop the transmission among all these athletes is to bring back football. I'm going back to the old saying I heard as a kid, idle hands are the devil's workshop. And I'm not saying that catching COVID is the devil's work. I'm not going to say that. But I will say that if you're sitting there with nothing to do, you're more likely to go out and be in a social situation where you can catch COVID. If you're going and lifting at 6 a.m., you got breakfast, then you got practice.
You don't have time to jack around.
You don't have to. Yeah, no, you don't. If your full day is consumed by football, the evening you're watching film instead of going out and partying, your chances of catching COVID are diminished. So when we're seeing almost 50 positive tests at Penn State, I think it would have been a lot less if the Big Ten had never canceled.
Well, it would have been a lot less if they would have not slapped restrictions on. Now, as a head coach and as a team, you can only do a walkthrough so often. You don't even have a green light to put pads on, for God's sake. Last time you put pads on was the end of the regular season last year, your bowl game. I'll say this. I think Nebraska has been fantastic with their directive. Do you guys want to play? Are you committed to play? Good. we're all on the same page. We all want to go play football. We all want to go play meaningful snaps against the highest competition. We want to see if we're a better football program now than we were at the buzzer against Iowa that left us home for the holidays at 5-7. Guess what that's going to take? It's going to take commitment. And you're going to have to ask yourself, what's most important to you? Is it getting on the field and putting a redemption-type season together? Or is it more important to go check out the honeys or go out with your bros? And they're all great women, and having a beer with your buddies are very important things, yes. But the here and now with this stupid pandemic, what's important to you? And it's important to stay away from areas that could get you in trouble with it. Like, I'm sure the Rutgers house party at the Shore was awesome. And I know what happened later. Everyone's not feeling the best because of COVID. Mike Babcock will weigh in. We'll talk some Husker ball with him. Great to be with you on a Wednesday. It's Hail Varsity. We're presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Brett Edwards coming up, and Mike Schuhart from Wilderness Ridge will join us on Hail Varsity. Just got this email from Doug Duda, our friend out in Kearney and Hastings with the Superstation ESPN 1460, 1550, Kearney, Hastings, Grand Island. This a tough story to tell you about, but it's Kearney High School JV and varsity football teams are quarantined due to COVID-19. A student at the Kearney High School JV varsity football team is a confirmed case of COVID and was unmasked at times during practice at a JV game on Monday. Was unmasked during practice and at a JV game on Monday, September 7th. Kearney Public Schools has consulted with the Two Rivers Public Health Department due to the periods of unmasked contact during football practice and the JV game. All 11th and 12th grade football players and all students who ate lunch with the positive students are required to quarantine for 14 days, according to the Centers for Disease Control. And students in close contact with a COVID-19 person must quarantine a full 14 days, regardless of whether or not they've been tested. The team members can return to school only if they're symptom-free by September 22nd. So the following games are indefinitely postponed for Kearney. Friday, September 11th, the varsity Kearney game at North Platte. Monday, September 14th, the JV game versus Southeast. And Friday, September 18th, varsity versus Millard West. So Kearney JV and varsity football quarantined.
I think the big question is going to be whether or not the JV team they played on Monday has any positive tests. That's how we're going to know.
Yeah, that's the question, and thoughts to the parents and families and the kids that are playing ball there. I know it's not ideal, and that's an understatement, and hope everyone's healthy and safe moving forward. And the player that did have COVID makes full recovery. Bring on Mike Babcock from HailVarsity.com and magazine at MD Babs on Twitter. Babbers, we're still in this holding pattern, this waiting game. The Big Ten has responded to several top state government officials and speakers and legislatures that put a open letter out to the Big Ten office yesterday. I know the unicameral did that today. Are you optimistic about maybe some, I don't want to say closure, but at least an answer, an update this weekend? Do you think a vote can actually happen this weekend?
Well, it seems like there's some indication that there would be a vote, but at the earliest. Mm-hmm. But I just don't think it's going to change from what it was. You know, the 11-3 thing. I don't think that it's going to change significantly from that, because the passionate ones are still the passionate ones, and the passionate ones are the ones that are, trying to do the right things and preparing and so forth. And as you talked earlier, you don't know where a lot of these programs are in terms of being ready to do something. If they were to say that in your best case scenario, October 10th or 17th or whatever, I just don't think that that's going to get overturned. And again, we see it through the lens of the passion that Nebraska has shown about it, and it goes beyond the football program. Obviously, that's pretty dramatic. But then we hear from Doug Duda, and we hear what happened with Kearney High School, and it is such a difficult thing to say what is right to do and what would happen if you went ahead now. We just don't know, and that's why I think that uncertainty is going to carry over, and we're going to see basically the same thing that happened already going back. That I'm not optimistic about what's going to happen, but I've been wrong enough times in my life to I guess say that you can have some hope about it, but I just don't see that enough people are going to be persuaded to go the other direction.
It's hard to get that number up to 9 to get that 60% the other way. We talked earlier about Penn State suspending activities. They didn't specify if it was football or what sport. But 48's a number. What do you tell your kids in Columbus, in Lincoln, if, all right, this is what we got, it's going to be Thanksgiving, you have no shot of playing for anything meaningful except for pride and to get better. That in itself is important. And Nebraska is in a rebuild development phase. We were expecting some good things this fall for Nebraska. You had an offensive line that was going to be pretty veteran. You had a quarterback that was getting pushed. You had some toys on the outside to play with. You had a run game. And we were excited to see what type of improvement the defense could make. All that can still happen. You just can't play for anything beyond a conference title or maybe a Rose Bowl, but you're not part of the bigger picture. While we don't know how many Big Ten teams would have challenged for that aside from Ohio State or a Penn State, everyone else is kind of in that runner-up mode. I hate to term it like that, but your two favorites, and throw in Wisconsin as well. You're really going to be pigeonholed as an empty season because you're not playing for a championship, although there are things that you can do to get better. I don't know how you sell that as a head coach to your kids and you keep kids from not either opting out or, if you're Ohio State's case, just going to the draft. Well,
that's the thing. That's the tough responsibility for the coaches. And yeah, you've got the NFL draft. There's so many implications by starting this thing late. And again, I go back. I don't see the feasibility of a spring season, and then turn right around and try to play in the fall. And to me, it boggles the mind. Maybe you could do that with volleyball, and maybe you could do that with soccer, but with football, I just don't think you could do it. And if you're talking about the health and safety of the student athlete as it relates to football, as to why you're not playing this fall, why would you put their health and safety at risk by playing two seasons in the same calendar year? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Health and safety go out the window, and you got to fulfill your TV contract obligations, Babbers.
Yeah, well, I know, and at that point, you'd say, well, then you should have just played in the fall, I guess.
No.
I mean, if you're gonna if you're going to put that as the reason to play in the spring, but it wasn't the reason to play in the fall, that you're being inconsistent, I think. So to me, the reason says to me, and maybe I'm not being reasonable here, is you either play in the fall now, or you don't play until the fall of 2021. And I know the economic impact that has, but if we're talking health and safety of the student athlete as it relates to football, I think that's what you have to do.
Mike Babcock's with us on Hail Varsity. Babbers, you look at some of the earnings that Nebraska has attributed to it, and specifically the earnings with Nebraska in reference to other programs. I want to go here and get off of will they or won't they play, and I want to go back to brand value. Of course, Nebraska's done a great job. We all saw the Wan'Dale Robinson video and tweet that's gotten a lot of views, but Nebraska ranks number 1 in brand value. That's pretty impressive. Just in front of Bama, just in front of Ohio State, just in front of Michigan, just to name a few, and just in front of Oklahoma. What do you think that means long term from a pitch standpoint on the recruiting trail?
Well, I think from a recruiting standpoint, it's really a positive. I mean, that's what you want to do. If you want to turn this into something that you can use that's a positive in recruiting, and I've always been in favor of the whatever benefits the student athlete. I'm in favor of that. But as I responded in the mailbag today, this whole thing about profiting from your image and whatever opens up a whole set of questions that I'm not smart enough to answer, and I think that they're going to have to be answered at some point. And that is, it's going to be a little bit more of a benefit, I think, for and I use quotes, skill position players to take advantage of that in football than it is for non-skill position players. And how would that impact at all team unity in any way, shape, or form? Because if you've got somebody that's really generating a lot of revenue off that, playing alongside somebody who's just getting by with a scholarship, how is that going to affect things?
Better feed the O-lineman, Babbers.
Yeah, you better. That's true. And so the student athletes, they can have agents, and if they have agents, how is that going to impact things? Because then who is the responsibility to? The agent, to the coach? It almost becomes like a professional situation in some ways, and how do you deal with that? And I'm probably exaggerating to make a point, but I think that these questions are things that are going to have to be answered at some, as we move forward. I don't think we know what the answers are because this is uncharted water.
Mike,
but, yeah, go ahead.
Mike, we've got about 15 seconds here, so you're going to have to be quick.
Okay.
But when we're looking at brand value, the past month, has that brand value Nebraska gone up? I mean, if it wasn't for Nebraska, I don't even know if we'd be talking about an October 10th or an October 17th start date.
Well, I hope it has. Initially it was Nebraska was getting hammered, and I think now it's gone up because other schools have come on board with it. But Nebraska's had that passion from the beginning.
Babbers, too short. We'll do this again next week, and hopefully we'll have some better news.
Hey, be safe.
You too, Babbers. Take care. Mike Babcock, historian, author, Hall of Famer. You read him with Hail Varsity. Shuey's up on the way.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
A little bit more clarity on this vote that may or may not happen this week or next week. So we asked the question earlier, what are you voting on? And I went way cart before the horse. I just assumed it's all part of the big pitch. But the president's whenever this vote happens, won't be voting to overturn a decision. This is per Ralph Russo from the Associated Press. But they'll be voting on a new medical guidance and return to play plan. So here's the plan. Here's the rapid testing. Here's the cardiogram. Here's all of that stuff. Here's where it's going to be. Here's when it's going to show up. And here's the target date to start, potentially. But you got those benchmarks and medical criteria you got to hit. I need to find my way over to the Wilderness Ridge Bar and pour a stiff one as we wait. And I can watch Mike Schuart teach some lessons on better ability off the tee box and how to sink some of those putts. Shuey joins us now from Wilderness Ridge. Shuey, you got the turtleneck on?
Not quite. I do have the sweater on, though. Got to have that today.
So does this make you just go back to your British Open memories?
Oh, yeah. I like this kind of weather, though. It's fun to play in this weather.
It's different. Give me this weekend, because we're going to have like mid-70s, right?
I know. It's going to be beautiful. And once we get through this, then the weather starts to warm back up, sun comes out. So we needed this rain bad. We were pretty dry. So this is a good thing. It's
been hot and sticky, and now it's cold and rainy. So, Shuey, before we dive into some Safeway Open thoughts, give me your pitch. I'm giving you the spokesperson job. You're the one making the argument to the chancellors and presidents whenever this vote is. Shuey, the floor is yours. Give them hell.
Yeah, I mean, it's like what makes no sense to me is that if you're going to allow your students on campus, you're going to allow high school to be played, intramurals to be played, all the things that are going on at your university, it makes no sense to me why you wouldn't have your football team playing. I mean, your football team has more guidelines available to them and that they're going through protocol-wise to keep them safe compared to your college student that's on campus. They have really none of that. So it's like you're allowing them to do basically what the college student's going to do, but not a football player. I mean, that makes no sense to me.
Great argument. And their response would be, well, at Penn State we have 40,000 students. That's $2 billion. We probably have shy of 400 student athletes. And while $120 million isn't anything to sneeze at, $2 billion, they won't say that, but there's their math equation.
Exactly. I mean, it's all money. It's all money why they have to do what they have to do from the student standpoint and then from the athletic standpoint. So it just, you can't, it's kind of like you're allowing them to do, you're saying one thing and doing another. And that's, you got to be consistent on what it is and the message that you're sending.
Let's talk consistency here and give me kind of a rundown here on the Safeway Open. You've got some folks that are looking to kind of rebound or stay hot. Tell me about the Silverado course in Napa. Is it breathtaking? Very much so. It's up in the wine country. It's beautiful up there. So, and you got guys, you got some guys that are going to use it to get ready for the U.S. Open. You got some guys that are going to use it to restart, like you said, with the FedEx Cup being over. Now it's kind of starting the wraparound season. So most of them are going to use it to get ready for the U.S. Open. Are you on Phil's wagon for this weekend? No. Not at all. He needs to stick with the champions. Okay. He can hammer those guys to death. So, he can still play, no question. It's not like what he did when he played his first Champions event. Those golf courses are not set up that much easier. It's just that competition is a little bit different. And he's still got a little gas in the tank, but he can't do it for 4 days. Too strong, too hard. He's 20-1. When you look at William Hill, the odds that opened up, Phil's at 20-1, Si Woo Kim at 20-1, and then Spieth's at 30-1, Sergio's at 30-1. So that's It's kind of where we're at. Who do you like right now? And who's maybe a dark horse? I mean, what are some guys that have impressed you here the last couple of weeks?
Scotty Scheffler.
Okay.
That's a guy I like a lot. He's had a really good season. Young guy, starting to come. There's just a ton of those young guys. Abraham Answer I always talk about. He's another guy, he started out really hot in the FedEx, couldn't quite hang in there, but another good player. Victor Hovland, Matthew Wolff, Morikawa, he's a household name now, but the young guys are starting to creep up the board. They're just starting to get, comfortable out there, and they can play. So you're starting to see the young revolution start to take over the tour.
When you look at some of the younger guys, Shuey, what impresses you about this younger generation, guys that are kind of nipping at some of the old guard heels? What's a trait you like about the young golfer, that 20 to 25-year-old range?
They're just fearless. I mean, they're so much more prepared as they come out there to be put on a big stage and not be influenced by that big stage. So they're very confident. They're incredibly gifted and trained. They're just better, technically sound golfers. And they're mentally more prepared. I mean, you got all those guys I talked about. I mean, they've won so much in college that they're not afraid of that big stage and that big situation. They get in there and they perform really well. So they've kind of surpassed a little bit or bypassed the experience element. Because again, they're so much more ready when they get out there to be competitive and to be able to win. So, and they're so powerful. I mean, they're just super athletic and super powerful in what it is that they do.
Mike, it seems like the Arnold Palmer Award this year, which is given to the Rookie of the Year on the PGA Tour, seems like it's a two-horse race between Victor Hovland and Scotty Scheffler. Scotty Scheffler's got all those top 5 wins, but then you got Hovland, he's got the one win on the tour. So who do you like with that award this year?
Yeah, I mean, winning is a big plus. So, because it's hard to win. I don't care what level you're at. It's just hard to win a golf tournament. So it's like winning has a little more of importance. Scheffler's had a great season, consistency-wise, but so is Hovland, and he has the win under his belt. So I would give the nod to him right now. But there's a lot of golf left to see.
Shuey, got a Fit Friday coming up here about 10 seconds.
No, we're actually started a couple of our junior programs. So
Okay.
we started a junior program. We're doing right now we're starting one. We call it Practice Like the Pros. So, and it's just every Wednesday. So we give the kids ideas of how we grew up practicing and playing, and giving them some things that they can take with them to continue their practice to get better at what they're doing. And then we have what we call boot camps. That's for more adults. We take them through kind of a 4-day session of golf. So this month's a lot of player development. So it's going to be fun.
Shuey, we'll talk next week. Thanks for a few minutes today.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
And we're back
Fellas, think we could listen to the radio listen?
on Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Yes! That's awesome!
Well, it's been a while. I don't know if he's been duct taped, muzzled, or just out of sight due to pure frustration, but PJ Fleck has spoken. So we were just talking about the fact that not every team's on the same page as Ohio State or Michigan or Nebraska when it comes to weekly practices. Right? We don't know if Sparty's been practicing. We know that Penn State has now paused because of COVID, and Iowa returned to action yesterday due to some COVID concerns. But you've had a 2-week break from things with Minnesota football, and they just got back to light workouts today. So they've not even been practicing, which is, there's not a lot you can do because of the no contact but there are walkthroughs. There is keeping guys around, but guys are just getting back. So I don't know if Minnesota is going to be the next program to pause things because they're going to have a COVID outbreak athletically if there's been a break. So what were guys doing? What were athletic players doing while they were away? No idea. But there's 3 different plans per FLEC. If we play in October, here's what we're going to do. If we play in November, here's that model. If we play in January, here's another model. So, again, with this potential weekend vote or vote next week, you've got to hit the health and safety benchmarks and then have a date circled. This is an interesting question from Heather Denich. We'll talk with Brad Edwards about that here in about 10 minutes. And this is interesting. So if you sync up, if you circle Thanksgiving for the Pac-12 and the Big Ten to rejoin the world of football, would the college football playoff wait a week or two, move back their December 20th announcement, and say that is now a January 1st reveal, and then you push things back a couple of weeks? Instead of the championship game on January 11th, do you drop it in that weekend there's no Super Bowl, post-NFC, AFC championship? Could you align that way? And if you're the college football playoff, you can do whatever the heck you want. Now, if you're the Pac-12 and the Big Ten, that would be a pitch you'd make. If you're the SEC or the Big 12, you're the ACC, it is just more time between you've got that rust versus rest thing.
I think there's a lot of problems with the idea.
I hear you. At least, no, there's a, yeah. Hey, you've been out in front. You've been grinding. Don't forget about us.
But having the college football playoff championship game that week between the championship games and the Super Bowl, what a weekend that would be.
Well,
I mean, there's never
something.
anything there.
No.
You have the Pro Bowl, but no one watches that.
Exactly.
That could be a fun game.
I'm just saying. We'll get thoughts from Brad Edwards. We'll get his reaction. How would the ACC and the SEC take? Hey, wait for the Big Ten and the Pac-12.
Welcome to Hail Varsity Radio, the voice of Husker Nation. Insight, opinion, expertise, with the biggest and best names talking Nebraska across the state. Join the show on Twitter at Hail Varsity and at Schmitz_radio. Call in at 402-466-ESPN or 1-800-825-5865. Here's Chris Schmitz.
Back with you at Tower 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbal. And it is Brad Edwards time, ESPN Insider College Game Day. Brad, you gearing up, man? Some Power 5 football this weekend. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Yeah, it'll be a nice shift of gears upward to get some Power 5 football, but I'm still not sure we're going to get any great football. I heard someone say yesterday that of all the ACC games, I'm not sure about the Big 12 games, that there's only one that has a point spread under 20, and that's the FSU Georgia Tech game, which I think is still like 12.5. So I just hope we can get some good games, because we certainly didn't get very many of those in week one.
We didn't, and I had to do a double take because BYU is going ground and pound. I'm used to seeing them throw 78 times from being a kid who watched football in the 80s to now. And even then, it was kind of a surprise to see BYU hand it off, even when they had Taysom Hill running around, man. But, yeah, I hope we get some tight games, but I think we'll have to ease into that. I don't know that it'll be great. I want to ask you here, and this was... And I know you filled in for Paul Feinbaum. This was a question and answer that was brought up with Heather Dinich, and I want your take on this. Say the Big Ten and Pac-12 can hit their medical benchmarks, and say that I have finally maybe locked the door on October 10th or even October 17th. I've been holding out hope for that, Brad. So I'm thinking maybe Thanksgiving. That said, if both Power 5 conferences get back at it later this fall, with the college football playoff postpone a week or two, not only from an announcement but from scheduling, to include both conferences, can the Pac-12 and Big Ten show up late to the party and still be part of the conversation?
I think those are two different questions with two different answers. I think the first one is that the playoff is not going to postpone. It's not going to push back a couple of weeks and wait on them. But the second one, I think the answer is yes, they could still be a part of it. And I think the key is if they were to announce, sometime within the next week or two that they're going to play and they're going to start at some point in October, at that stage, I think that everyone will be waiting for a statement by the playoff and the selection committee saying that they either will or won't consider them for the playoff. And I don't know why they wouldn't, to tell you the truth. Now, I realize that by the time that the final rankings would come out, they would have played fewer games than everyone else. But the teams never have the same number of games. Sure, most of the time that the four they choose have played 13 games, but there have been a couple of times that a team had 12 games. Obviously, Notre Dame made it in. They had 12. Some of the times before the Big 12, restarted the conference championship game, they had 12. And so would it make a huge difference if, maybe one team had played 11 and someone else had played 8? I don't know. I don't, to me, it still comes down to the selection committee's job. Their stated goal is to pick the 4 best teams. And if all these teams are playing, and if there's enough of a body of work by any team that's played fewer games to still convince the selection committee that they're one of the 4 best teams, then I think the committee's job is to put them in. And so to me, I would be fascinated to see if that were to happen in the Big, let's just use the Big Ten. Mm-hmm. If they were to say we're going to start in October, would they adjust the schedule in order to front load it for the teams that they think have the most playoff potential, to give them a chance before, I believe December 19th is the targeted conference championship Saturday for the 3 that are starting in September? Would they front load the schedule so that by that Saturday they would have had a chance to play enough quality opponents to impress the selection committee despite having fewer games overall? And I think if they do that, the committee should take them.
Brad Edwards with us, ESPN Insider College Game Day at @JBradEdwards on Twitter. Brad, as we shift gears, and Ohio State's kind of a known quantity, Penn State, we'll see what they are when we play. I know they've paused workouts today. You had 48 student athletes test positive for COVID. The Big Ten's not on even footing. Minnesota's just getting back to practice today after a 2-week hiatus, not COVID-related. Iowa just resumed action Tuesday. I don't know if Sparty's practicing. I know Harbaugh and Michigan have been practicing, as has Ohio State, as has Nebraska. So you've got a bunch of schools that are uneven, and I think that's going to be a problem for this hopeful October start date. As we look forward to the ACC and the SEC, in your opinion and in your research, or what do you know, what programs have dealt with this uncertainty the best? What programs have been able to stay disciplined and really give themselves a chance here once we do kick off next weekend and in the following weeks? Who do you think's ready to go for 2020?
Well, and I guess there are a number of ways to approach that. One is simply from the test results. And, we all know of some schools that have had reports that things aren't going well, and certainly those would be disqualified. But I think, the others would be, or I should say, among the ones that have not had major outbreaks of cases on their roster, you'd have to ask additional questions like how well have they prepared? As far as are the coaches coordinated and have the right plan in place to do everything to get the players as ready as possible for the first game? And one example I'll use here is Navy. Navy had, as far as I'm aware, the same amount of time to get ready as BYU. But they chose a different approach, which was to avoid, contact in practice. There was no live tackling. And while that doesn't explain why the Navy offense got completely shut down, or maybe it does in a small way, but it certainly explains why their defense struggled the way that it did. And so I think it's just the same thing as like bowl prep. Like there are a lot of different ways to go around preparing for a game when you've had extended time off. And I think the same thing would apply to this situation, and even more so with the number of other dynamics that are at work. And so it comes down to, who has prepared the best, who has been fortunate as far as, COVID cases, who has been fortunate as far as opt-outs and transfers and all of those types of things. And, when you look at the major players around the country, Alabama is one that really stands out. I mean, look, it wouldn't be shocking to me if Saban has just kept such a tight lid on things that players have opted out and we just haven't heard about it yet. Although at a school like that, it's just so hard to believe that if anyone major had decided not to play, that it wouldn't have leaked. Mm-hmm. And so I hear nothing out of Tuscaloosa, which leads me to believe that everything is going according to plan. And given that they didn't make the playoff for the first time last year, and what their motivation level is, the fact that we're hearing silence from them, it feels dangerous for everybody else, especially when you put it up beside, all of the issues that LSU's having. Auburn, we saw reports that they had 20-something players who had had to miss practices, COVID-related stuff. Georgia, with they had a season-ending injury to one of their key receivers. The quarterback opts out. You just look everywhere else at their competition, the SEC, and you see teams that are not having things go their way in the lead up to the season. And meanwhile, like I said, nothing's coming out of Tuscaloosa. So it's possible that everything is just kind of chugging right along there.
When you look at Bama and their motivation, it's clear. What do you anticipate from Bama this year as far as defense, offense? I mean, they have lost a lot of talent over the years, but they've also, and I don't want to say they got fat and happy. They got beat by some teams that were more talented last year, and you don't say that often either. But they just, for them, had an air quote down year. And it's a chance to reload this year. I mean, you've got Bama, and then let's kind of look at them compared to Clemson with what Clemson's got coming back. And then, let's talk a little bit about Notre Dame, because Notre Dame's usually doing the world tour. Now it's the ACC tour. I mean, do you have, aside from Bama and Clemson, who are some of the other teams that you're really eyeing that could either break through to the postseason or put a run together that maybe we haven't seen from them in a while?
Yeah, and this is where, normally you'd look at the ACC and you'd say, well, it's just Clemson and everyone else. Notre Dame, you mentioned, I mean, they're an interesting team, but they play Clemson in the regular season. And, the ACC does not have divisions for this year. So the top two, just like the Big 12, top two will go to the conference championship game. And so in theory, Notre Dame, in order to be selected by to play in the playoff, you would think would have to win at least one of those two games against Clemson.
Yeah.
Preferably the second one, for their sake, to be a conference champion. But if they get swept by Clemson, unless both of them are really, really close and Clemson just blows out everyone else in the conference and Notre Dame doesn't lose to anyone else, I mean, it seems like they would have to beat Clemson in order to get that nod. But And this is where you get back to, okay, do the Big Ten and Pac-12 get back on the field in time to be considered? Because if they don't, okay, you would assume that, Clemson, whoever wins the SEC, whoever wins the Big 12, those teams are in. Then it becomes a question of, okay, second team from one of those other conferences, more than likely the SEC, or is there an undefeated team in the American that could make a case? And that's really it. And if no one goes undefeated through the American, then, it seems certain that it's going to be a second team from one of those other leagues. And it's just a question of, okay, who's the best positioned second place team? And here's something else to think about along those lines. Georgia is one that is kind of on the tip of my tongue as I'm answering your question about, who else could it be to keep an eye? Now, of course, Georgia obviously has been a top 5 team for the last few years. It's not like they're coming out of nowhere or need to be, mentioned as a dark horse or anything like that. But because of the things that have happened with Georgia, all the players that they lost from last season, like I said, the injury to one of their key receivers a week or two ago, the opt-out of their starting quarterback. They've got a new offensive coordinator. I do wonder that in a year like this where there are just so many weird things that everyone has to contend with, would the selection committee, in a way that they've never done before, take into account momentum at the end of the season? Would they forgive a slow start, understanding all the things that are at work? And if you lose a game early, or maybe you lose 2 games early, but then you're really dominant down the stretch, would they be more likely to judge you based on what you are at the end as opposed to the complete body of work? In some ways, that would be inconsistent with what they've done in previous seasons, but you would think if there's ever a year that you would take that approach, it would be this year, because there are some teams, Navy, that just aren't going to be ready for the first game for whatever reason, and I would imagine some of them are going to look quite different by week 5. And you wonder, is the selection committee in this particular year going to say, well, that's just too bad?
Brad, I want to go back to those top 2 teams, the 2 teams that everyone really thinks is the favorites to win the college football playoff this year, and that's Alabama and Clemson. Now, when you look at Alabama, they're replacing Tua, who is arguably the most important player to that offense in the past decade in terms of how he shifted that offense, and we got it away from what we traditionally think of from a Saban offense. But then you also have Clemson returning Trevor Lawrence. Who do you like if that is the 2 teams who make it to the college football playoff come January?
Yeah, it's hard right now not to like Clemson just because you know what they have at quarterback, and you don't know yet about Alabama. Although Alabama you know more about than really any other team that's replacing its quarterback, because Tua did get injured with a few games left. And so we got to see Mac Jones not only start a few games, he started 4 games last year, but you also got to see him start against 2 good defensive teams. He started against both Auburn and Michigan. And outside of 2 huge pick sixes that he threw against Auburn, you can't pretend like those don't exist, because those plays kept them out of the playoff more than likely. But you take away 2 really bad decisions that he made in one of his first starts of his college career. He played really well against 2 good defensive teams in the last 2 games. And so I don't think there's any reason to believe that Alabama is not going to still be very explosive offensively. I think the question is, are they going to be better defensively? And then with Clemson, my biggest question, I'm not sure this is going to be a big deal at the start of the season just because of their competition, but who's going to step up at receiver and replace T. Higgins and Justin Ross? Because the whole time Trevor Lawrence has been in college, he's had those 2 guys to throw to every game, and now he has neither of them. Now, Clemson, if you look at their recent history for the last decade, they've had at least one future NFL receiver, if not future NFL star, out there every year. So the odds are good that there's another one waiting in the wings. But until we see who that is and who his go-to guy or guys will be, it is. I think it's reasonable to question, will he be as effective of a quarterback without those 2 to throw to? And we'll find out in the next few weeks.
Brad, thanks for jumping on. We'll check in next week. It's always good to chat with you, and thanks for the insight.
You got it. Take care, guys.
See ya. Brad Edwards with us on Hail Varsity.
Chime in 402-466-ESPN or email the show, Chris@HailVarsity.com.
Just try me.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back with you at Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. A reminder what's happening with your friends down in the rail yard in Hail Varsity. This is pretty cool. And hopefully you had a good time with the Missouri-Nebraska game last Saturday at the Cube. Well, you've got the faux football, the throwback games going on September 12th. And things get rolling at 5:30. Game day at the rail yard with Hail Varsity. Got the Iowa game, 2014. How good was that?
The one in Iowa City with
the one with Kenny Bell making the catch in overtime.
Great game.
Awesome game.
One of the last games
last time they beat Iowa.
It's one of the last games I enjoyed watching as a
So
Nebraska
that was a phenomenal ball game. And then you've got the 2000. Hold on a minute. Not 2000. The 94 Nebraska-Colorado game. So they're double-deckering this thing. You beat Iowa, and then you beat the Buffs.
Yes, I can't say I remember that 94 game off the top of my head.
I went with my cousin Jason, who went to Colorado at the time. We all sat, him and his three buddies from Buffalo, showed up in the old Fred Flintstone Grand Poobah hats. They were Buffalo hats. And it was number 2 versus number 3, but really for the number 1 ranking, because Colorado had the miracle at Michigan with Cordell Stewart and the Hail Mary earlier in the year, and that 94 Buffs team was just loaded. And Brooke Behringer in Nebraska put the smack down, but it was Coach McBride's D that was phenomenal. 24-7, Nebraska did in Colorado.
Oh, spoilers. I was going to go down to the Cube this weekend and watch it.
Go watch it anyway. It's always fun to curb stomp Colorado, specifically that Buff team in 94. The only loss they had. So I think they finished number 3 in the country that year. So right behind Nebraska, right behind Penn State. But the 94 game's your nightcap. Things get kicked off, though, 5:30. Iowa, Nebraska, 2014. Kenny Bell doing his work. Brandon Riley. What a comeback, man. That was outstanding. Okay, so we told you about Fleck, and we've gotten into a little bit from the Big Ten's response to the lawmakers and people of high political standing around the Big Ten. So 10 political leaders from 6 states asking the league to reverse its decision to postpone football. And the Big Ten's response is not just dripping with smugness. It is engulfed with smugness. The response: we would not or could not agree more with the group of Midwest legislators who stated in a letter to Commissioner Warren that the Big Ten Conference is, quote, home to some of the world's leading institutions of higher learning, scientific research, and medicine. The Big Ten's Return to Competition Task Force is tapping into those resources as it prepares for a safe return to competition. The letter reflects that we all want the same thing, which is for sports to continue safely. The conference will continue to work with the Big Ten Council of Presidents and Chancellors, as it has always done, to identify opportunities to resume competition as soon as it is safe to do so. But Brad Edwards' commentary last segment about the college football playoff maybe not ruling out a Big Ten or Pac-12 team. If you're Oregon and you start in November, can you do enough if you're Oregon and Ohio State to be part of the conversation? I think the conference would help you out with scheduling. That's a lot to ask after a long, long layoff to presumably, if you're Ohio State, kick it off against Michigan, follow it up with Penn State, then you get Wisconsin, then you get Iowa, and who's the 5th team you'd tack on?
Throw Nebraska on there.
Yeah, sure. Give them Nebraska.
Let's have Nebraska ruin Ohio State's college football chances. I'd love that.
That'd be fun. I'd just prefer that it's a game similar to the 2018 ball game,
As opposed to 2019?
well, as opposed to the last several where there's been several touchdowns. So, and I like this response to Adam Rittenberg's post on Twitter, and it's in quotes here from our friends on Twitter, Husker Guys, as soon as it's safe to do so. So, they're saying it's unsafe when you have 1,000 high school games that have already happened and you have 76 Division I teams that think it's safe to play. But yeah, it's the Big Ten saying, well, we know what's best. We're smarter than you. That's my read into this. Stay in your lane. Let us keep Big Tenning. I don't know, man. And then you also think about this, too, just where Nebraska is going to be at. And we've talked attrition, and I know you had a loaded news day on Friday with Keyshawn Green transferring out, and he is off to Florida Atlantic. I'm kind of surprised that Florida Atlantic's the landing spot just based on his talent level and skill set. I also think there's a reality where there's probably not a lot of Power 5 scholarships open.
And Willie Taggart, who's down at FAU now, was the coach at Florida State whenever he was committed to Florida State. So it makes sense.
There's your connection. Absolutely.
It makes sense, but you do think that guy's got all the talent in the world.
No, he does. So think if you're Hymas for Nebraska and what you came back for, and that's been put on hold. You have been very selfless. I mean, you're Brandon Hymas. You could go to the NFL. You've decided to come back and anchor an offensive line. You and Farniok. What's his future look like? Christian Gaylord getting a 6th year. I mean, Gaylord's an awesome dude and was going to be a guy that was going to provide some depth. Still can, but no one's getting to do it right now. And then you've got Dolman and Dismuke and Boodle and Deontay Williams, Stilley and Damian Daniels. I know Daniels is a junior, but he's redshirted. He's been around a while. I don't know what is next from an attrition standpoint in Nebraska. You look at the Florida kids that have departed here from the recruiting classes. Overall, you've had the majority of your attrition with Nebraska's roster. 50% of that has been from your transition class, from your 2018 signing period. And Scott Frost stood up and manned up, and he stuck with his team and coached him in a bowl game, but he was trying to recruit and get ready for Auburn at the same time, and it was slammed together. That's not their fault. It's just the reality of an early signing period where you had to go see what you could get, and you're going to lose guys through the cracks that were committed to the previous staff. So you've had a lot of attrition with Nebraska. You flipped the roster, and I think you've went out and you've probably weeded out guys that maybe weren't as committed or just didn't fit or probably weren't that talented or just, I don't want to say didn't want to grind, but maybe they didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel from a depth chart standpoint. But in the last 2 classes, you've had, I think, 4 or 5 guys leave. And that's okay. I mean, you're going to have some attrition. If you hit 50% of your recruits and they contribute, that's a major win. That's why you need walk-ons like a Jano, right? Or a Foltzy, or dare I say a Tomich. I mean, some really big-time walk-ons that not only played but thrived and were all conference guys.
I mean, yeah, you have, 25 spots in a recruiting class every single year? There's not 25 seniors seeing the field every single day. There's only 22 starting spots, and half of those guys are underclassmen or juniors. I mean, there's room for attrition. That's why recruiting classes are allowed to be so big. So it's a question of, do you have faith in Scott Frost and the program that he's building?
I do. I think, I think so. They just need to be able to get on the field and work out some of the kinks. And you've seen them look really good. I think in 2018, You felt the momentum, the way the season ended, the win against Sparty, the game against Ohio State, the comeback against Iowa. But I also think you had some really big-time pillar guys that were seniors on that team that had been through hell and back with their career and their transitions. And I'm thinking of the Giffords, right? I'm thinking of Mick Stoltenberg. I'm thinking of some of those guys that were fifth-year seniors that really took over leadership of the football team and willed this team forward in 18. Well, in 19, you had some guys that did their best, but it just didn't come together. You didn't have as strong a leadership, in my opinion, last year. And Coach Barnett's talked about that a lot. It's not year one, it's year two that can get you from just what's the locker room like. And now you get year three, if you get to it, where it should be same page. But you got a number of guys. I mean, Colin Miller is a senior, Dedrick Mills, Honus, Bo Wilson. You got a bunch of dudes that, man, they've been gearing up to have a special senior season and have a winning season. Because, I mean, the last winning season you had, you got to go back to 2016. Either these guys were red shirts or maybe just getting to campus. And that's not necessarily the case. Maybe some of these kids have not ever had a winning season here. I never thought I'd say that in my lifetime. But they're trying to get to it. They're trying to build off of some of the positives last year and for sure weed through the negative and just be better. Be better for 4 quarters. They just got to get that chance. And I'm hoping through this stupid pandemic you get a shot to go prove yourself on the field. I want to see Nebraska hook up with Ohio State this year. Everybody does. But you want to see where they're at. Are they closer to the 2018 squad that was kind of carefree and confident and it was house money? You weren't supposed to do anything to Ohio State anyway. They played their ass off, played a great game. And last year you maybe got a little too fat and happy. Maybe you thought you were something and you got humbled. So it's totally response time. We'll get into some NFL coming up. It is opening night, Chiefs, Texans. Who do the Donks open with?
We got the Titans on Monday night next week.
Ooh.
Could be an interesting one.
So a donkey party.
I mean, I'm excited for it. We got to see if the Titans offense is legit or if their little playoff run was just a fluke.
They're going to hand off and double tight, and it'll be about an hour and a half ball game. All right, Jock Doc's on the way.
He's in his 30s, but sounds like he was born with a stogie in one hand and a brew in the other.
Now, say my name.
It's Schmitty on Hail Varsity Radio.
I got the body of a taut, preteen Swedish boy.
Back with you at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Time for a Jock Doc Wednesday. Lincoln Orthopedic Center. Dr. Doug Tavis with us. Dr. Doug, what's up? Good to talk with you.
Well, we've got a little bit of moisture around here. That's good. And it's going to warm up later in the week. That'll be good. It's a lot of good things going on, Chris.
I know. It's a lot of British Open weather earlier this week. You need a turtleneck and get the old umbrella out. But
oh, man.
It's still baseball season, and one of my favorites is Eric Hosmer. He had the hair. He always treated Royals fans to an open tab, which I thought was pretty classy. And one of the upstarts this year's San Diego, and they're a ton of fun to watch. Where do they go? You've got Hosmer fracturing that index finger while trying to bunt. 2 to 6 weeks is the timeline here. And Dr. Doug, this was nasty here when you look at the bunt attempt and where the finger was.
Yeah, well, you're right. It was nasty, and I'm glad you're just going to ask me about the finger instead of the decision making to bunt with 2 strikes. But anyway, that ball hit him just immediately on the tip of that finger, and you can actually see on the video how the finger deforms just a little bit, as the ball is hitting it. So that's just a tough injury.
I'm not one to second guess the professional athlete and how many times he's squared to bunt in his life, but I'm watching the video right now, and he turned and squared to bunt and pulled it back, and he's looking at his left hand right now, and it was pretty gruesome. What's the look here? Because he didn't even really have the old fist and thumb technique down for the bunt. It was more of a I'm kind of grip it, and he was crazed by the no doubt third base sign to bunt anyway. So as far as treatment and healing and all that, what's like a worst case with this, and then what's normal for healing and to get back to it?
Yeah, so, the way this one happened, and we've talked about this before, where batters will get fractures because of the ball impacting the hand against the bat, and that's clearly what happened here. In the location that the ball hit him, it's really going to be involving that last segment of bone on the index finger. Those fractures are ones that you really don't typically try to do a surgical intervention for. It's sort of a smash kind of a thing. The bone will break apart in a bit of a stellate manner is the best way I can describe it. Several different fragments to it. And so you usually just let the soft tissue sleeve around the bone be the support for the bone and let that thing heal. Now, you asked about worst case scenario. The worst case scenario is if it breaks into the joint, and then you end up in a situation where you sometimes do need to do a surgical intervention, and you're dealing with some pretty small fragments of bone around a joint, and a lot of times that just leads that injury leads to a degenerative joint right there in between the first and second bone there on that finger. Now, for a lot of people, that wouldn't be a big deal, but for a guy who makes a living using a bat, that's a big problem.
Dr. Doug Davis is with us, Lincoln Orthopedic Center at Jock Doc Wednesday. We're talking Eric Hosmer and his fractured index finger as he squared to bunt and got drilled with a pitch. You've got San Diego, or Slam Diego, as they're known, with all the grand slams they're hitting this year. Just 4.5 back of the Dodgers. And Haas has put a little heater together. He's up to near 300, 8 homers, 32 RBI. We know the shortened season. So from a pain threshold standpoint, Haas is tough, but is this one of the more painful injuries you can get on the fingers or hand as a baseball player?
Well, anybody who's had a hand injury will tell you that they hurt like crazy. Mm-hmm. And a big part of that is because, especially with a fracture, there just is no room for the bleeding to occur internally. The tissue around it just doesn't have much room for that swelling to expand. And it does. It hurts really tough. So this is going to be one of those things where, they said 2 to 6 weeks him being out. Yeah, it could be 2 weeks, but to be able to, especially do what he's doing this season, where he's hitting the ball, very consistently. He's taking the ball out. What did you say? He had 8 home runs, I think, this year. He's really getting some power into his game, and I think this is going to be tough for him to come back and perform at that kind of a level, even in a 6-week kind of a time frame. Now, he may be able to hit for average. He's a pretty tough guy, but I don't know that he's going to be able to have that power for the rest of the season, the rest of the short season.
What's a fair timeline to get back to normal from a grip and a power standpoint, let alone the mental side of he's not a guy that'll worry about getting dinged again, but it's somewhere in the back of your mind if another inside pitch comes.
Yeah, well, and it's just one of those things where, some people have said that hitting a baseball is the hardest thing that there is to do in all sports. And, if you've got anything flinching you, anything that's altering your reaction or altering your swing, your performance is bound to go down. So what's a fair assessment? Probably next spring.
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. Eric Hosmer is our topic. His trigger finger got just sniped on an inside pitch. 0-2, I shouldn't say 0-2, but a 2-strike bunt attempt. He got drilled accidentally, and we're talking injured list here between 2 and 6 weeks for Haas, and he's kind of been that heartbeat for San Diego. They had a lot of young talent. He's been a brilliant acquisition for San Diego as they've surrounded talent around him, and he's kind of their leader. Now, Dr. Doug, real quick on Haas, he can still be that guy in the clubhouse even if he's not out on the field. He can help this young team maybe stay together versus scatter apart. I mean, everyone's going to make the playoffs, it feels like, this year, but San Diego's got a shot to do more than just get in.
Yeah, and they're going to be looking for a leader like that. It's been a while since they've had that, and Hosmer's been there. I think he'll continue to do that. And like I said, he may be able to come back and do some very effective hitting. I just don't think that he's going to be able to come back and do the power hitting that he's been doing.
Any hampering defensively? I mean, I know he's a guy at first, and he's a lefty. As far as throwing the ball, could this be problematic, at least grip or feel?
Well, at first base, of course, there's not as much, throwing activity. For a pitcher, it would be a very significant thing because you're always trying to spin that ball a little bit, and your index finger is a big part of that, in certain grips. But no, I don't. I think that's less of a concern. Other than fielding those bad hops. Again, you kind of have that little flinchy thing going on when you got that hand, your throwing hand, not gloved, and you got a bad hop coming at you. It's a little hard to just stick it out.
Dr. Doug, thanks for the time today.
You bet, Chris. You take care.
Miss us?
Come here, brother. Give me a hug. Bring it in for the real thing.
We're on call for you. Catch the podcast at HailVarsity.com, the ESPN Lincoln app, or download them on iTunes.
Saddle up, partner.
Back to Hail Varsity Radio.
One final time tomorrow on the show, we'll run down Blair Kirchhoff, Kansas City Star. Get ready for the Chiefs' title defense and see what his thoughts are for maybe back-to-back for Kansas City, as Elijah Herbal, noted Donkey fan, snarls at that. Gary Barnett will be with us, Brandon Vogel, Pride of Chicago, Danny Burke. He'll have some college football and NFL picks for us. Reminder about moving. 2020 may be the year you move, and West Blue Realty is there to take your phone call. They specialize in residential home sales in Lincoln and surrounding communities. They'll make the move a smooth one for you. When you mention Hail Varsity, they can provide you up to $1,000 upon the closing of your next home purchase. Give Tom Luby a shout at 402-540-3768, or Kelly Hofschneider. Kelly can help as well at 402-202-2312. It pays to work with West Blue, westbluerealty.com, and make an appointment. Go see him, 1120 K Street, Suite 200. They can also help you out with agricultural land sales and do that well. Also, a reminder about drinking and driving. Nearly 70% of people in fatal crashes in Nebraska are not wearing their safety belt. If used properly, a seatbelt can reduce the risk of fatal injury up to 60%. Your best defense in any crash. Buckling up, brought to you by the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office, specifically if you are in a beer truck and you hit a taco stand.
Not a stand, a whole store.
I know, but it's a giant stand as a store. That was messed up.
I was shocked because, it's 25 on that street there.
I know. It's the old College View region in Lincoln, and you had a Coors Light truck collide with the Taco John's? Taco Inn. Yeah, my wife always, like every Wednesday, she goes with her mom and her relatives. That'd be one of the stops. They'd hit the Taco Inn.
And whenever we're out running errands, as a kid, my mom took me to that Taco Inn a lot.
It's a drive-through, brother.
With like the steep hill.
We'd go there in high school.
That's
all
a
the
classic.
Time.
Yeah.
We'd shoot down Calvert, and it's taco time, brother.
I gotta say, the beer colliding with the taco sounds a lot like an average Saturday night for me, though.
It's beer and tacos go together. They are a staple.
If you're having one, it's just wrong to not have the other.
You just don't want to do it that way. So you've got me thinking beer and tacos. Uncle Andy is making his world-famous chili. So I may have to go that direction. And he will have cinnamon rolls with said chili.
I was going to say, chili, cinnamon rolls, and beer.
Possibly. I may have to postpone workouts. They've been postponed definitely with the wrist and shoulder issue. So that's no good. What do you got going tonight?
Watch my Nuggets probably lose to the Clippers.
What is that thing at 3-0?
It's 2-1.
Oh, okay.
2-1, which isn't bad. And then the Nuggets showed some life last time. But other than that, prepare some bets for the first NFL Sunday, maybe.
You going to get that locked in?
I think so. I think this is going to be a good week to bet just because we don't know, or in Vegas doesn't know either, what's the team's going to look like coming out of this COVID training camp.
I want to, and there's reports, too, that Mike Evans may not go. He might have a hamstring issue.
I might bet against Tampa Bay week 1.
Oh, I think New Orleans. Yeah, Tampa's like everyone loves Tampa, but they love Tampa after week 9 to put a run together. Talk to you tomorrow. Big thanks to Brad Edwards, of course, Mike Babcock, and our dear friend Mike Schuhart. Talk to you tomorrow at 4 on ESPN.